Hi, I'm Lily Kyriacou. I'm the founder and CEO of Rezilien. We are turning execution from a vague art form into a hard science so organisations can navigate the complexities of perpetual change better.
And hi, my name's Alex. I'm the founder of Favourite Positions, the podcast which is all about helping you find your next dream role. I'm delighted to be co-hosting this series of roundtable debates with Lily, and today's topic is a very interesting one.
If you're a leader of an enterprise organisation or an SME and you're undergoing any level of high stakes change, this is the episode for you.
Let's delve into the episode.
Organisations are operating in what I like to call a rolling turbulence, a state of rolling turbulence. And what do I mean by that? We mean perpetual change. So technological shifts, new operating models, new investor expectations, new restructures all at once. And if we think about it, strategies have never looked better on paper. But when we find ourselves at the other end of it, the value that was expected to be produced hasn't materialised, outcomes haven't been met, and expectations haven't been met. So what's actually breaking in the process? And why is it breaking? So that's where we're going to sit this evening. We're going to sit in the middle of that tension between, on one hand, change fatigue and concern and resistance to change, and on the other hand, organisational complexity, whether that be structures, the way that work is incentivised, the different layers that contribute to that. All right?
Sounds good.
So we're going to get kicked off with the first question soon, but in the meantime,
We would love for you to introduce yourself. We have an amazing range of experts within the room coming from different industry backgrounds, and it'd be great to hear from you all and find out a little bit about your work and why you're here today.
Sure. So, hi all, I'm Matt Dedman. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for an IT consulting company in the world of asset management. Today, I sit with an operational hat on, but previously I've come from working for very large IT vendors in sales positions and really having people at kind of the core of what I do. Hence why I'm passionate to be here and kind of share some thoughts with you all.
I'm Chloe Holt. I'm the Chief Client Officer at an organisation called Godel Technologies. We're a digital engineering partner operating in a space that is undergoing a significant amount of change and disruption, which obviously makes this topic very important and one that I think we are navigating as well as an organisation. So, yeah, really looking forward to being here in the room and kind of discussing and hearing the different viewpoints.
Lovely to be here. I'm Ella Blackstad. I'm a Senior Manager in Accenture's Supply Engineering Reinvention Group. I work primarily with companies across the consumer goods and aerospace space, but all focused on manufacturing, really. So the sweet spot for me is helping companies translate the executive vision and strategy into something that is practical and that is brought to life and in the best, most efficient way possible, but that they get the value out of that. So really knitting together the top floor discussions with the realities on the shop floor of a manufacturing site.
we're going to start this off quite wide, and there's a purpose to this. I want you to take your own directions in this and find our way around your own context. In change, organisational change specifically, what do you find undermines it most?
We discussed it just before we started. We were on a bit of a briefing, and I was in two minds then, and I'm probably still in two minds now.
Please.
Is it people or is it the organisational kind of structure?
Yeah.
And I think I'm an advocate of it's people really that can break first, because to me, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, people are the glue, if you like, of any organisation. So
Yeah.
people are those that put the structure in place. People are those that can listen to what the team are doing and kind of pivot that structure. So
Yeah.
for me, the people are at the forefront, and everything else are the building blocks that they can affect and they can change alongside that.
Yeah, I'd agree on that. I think that the organisations and the complexity that we deal with can create the conditions in which you're likely to succeed or not.
Yeah.
But again, it's that who gets to dictate what that organisational structure, that programme structure is.
Yeah.
It's still people. And I think often in the context of change, we think about those that are having the change done to them, or they're on the receiving end of it, but actually it's also humans that get to set the strategy and set things off on the right path.
Yeah.
So I think for me, as a build of what undermines those changes, sometimes even just down to some human nature. You know, we all want to succeed, we all want to do our best, hopefully, but also within an organizational setting, a lot of that is the behaviors and our natural instincts are driven by the, like, how are we judged on success? You know, what are the KPIs that we're being judged on? And that either has the potential to incentivize people to adjust to the new ways of working, or you're incentivizing them staying in the old ways of working. I think when it comes down to then some of the practicalities of it, building on the KPIs and metrics, so often people are incentivized based on looking busy, you know, looking like they're doing things as opposed to the outcomes of what is being done. So I think it's success or not is dependent on human behavior from top to bottom, but we can set the organization off in the right way to either set us off on our best day, or for us to lean into our worst behaviors.
I think obviously people also really shape culture. And I do think culture is just such a powerful force when an organization is experiencing change. Obviously the landscape that we're operating in at the moment has never been more fluid. And I think culture, if you've got a really solid culture in an organization, it almost like allows and holds space for some of that ambiguity that an organization might be feeling as the landscape continues to shift and changed. And obviously I'm coming at it from work for a digital engineering business where, our bread and butter historically was software development. That's never looked more different today and in the future than it ever has done historically. So I think that culture is a really important grounding force in an organization as we navigate perpetual change, to use your kind of language there, Lily.
Okay, so if we were to, for the audience, if we were to define people and the human behaviours and culture, because we picked up on both as important in undermining or driving organisational change, how would we, first of all, what are the differences between the two, if there are any? Are they interdependent by nature? And what does that dynamic look like? And what specifically about them do we think holds that foundational base that we're talking about when we're talking about driving high stakes organizational perpetual change?
I think on the culture part, defining culture, and if you think about in the workplace where someone says, we've got a terrible culture. What do you mean by that?
Yes.
And it's often, people blame each other, or people aren't accountable, and it's often again stems back to people, in my view. So I think to the point we were making earlier, do people resist change? I would argue probably not. What they're resisting is the uncertainty. So they're worried about job security or incentives or the remit of their role. So I think, not sure I've answered the question necessarily, but I think it's kind of stemmed back to, in my view, people are at the forefront of the culture as well that comes with that.
Psychological safety.
Absolutely.
It's just so key. Again, I will probably use the word ambiguity a lot because actually we do know today that leaders are having to operate in a sea of ambiguity, and it's kind of, how do your people come on that journey with you and trust you? And obviously this is the decisions that you are making in and amongst that ambiguity, and how you are going about that obviously are, kind of how and what your people are following. So I think, again, a leader's behavior and how you operate as a leader is kind of really what shapes culture. It's one kind of key pillar of what shapes culture. So I think that's, a really key point. Sorry, you're gonna
I totally agree on that. I think if you're lucky enough to have worked for a really strong leader, although they might not have been explicit around, here's the culture and here are the expectations, there's just something in you would follow them into battle. You would take what they're saying, and any of the changes that come through, you'll go with it because you trust that they've got your back, or that whatever they're doing is gonna also in your interests. I think what I sometimes see is, particularly in large organizations where you've got little sort of microcosms within there, you might have a strong culture within different teams, but ultimately your team lead has to enable a much higher level strategy. The seeds of doubt in those teams that break that trust in the leadership come if there's that sense of, does my leader understand this? Like, is it very clear? Like,
Yeah.
do they have the answers,
Mm-hmm.
or are we just having to go with this
Yeah.
because it's been defined elsewhere? I think that it's so important to have that enough clarity, or at least the ability to explain what's happening in a way that gives your team security. And I think being comfortable and confident in explaining, you know, here's the amount of the strategy, like here's what we know so far.
Yeah.
As the days, weeks, months go on, it's going to evolve, and I'll keep you updated. But I think that sometimes people are looking for that 100% right from the beginning, and when it's not there, you start to have those seeds of doubt.
Yeah, there's so much grey in the, I think, particularly in the world we're operating at the moment. There's a lot of grey, and actually I'm quite comfortable in the grey, and I would say that my team probably call me Chloe Grey Holt, because it's just it's kind of my norm.
Suits you.
Yeah, well, but I think what's really interesting is when I think about our clients who are orchestrating and driving change, when it works really, really well is when there's a lot of communication from the boardroom down into the organisation. There is a level of empathy that what's discussed probably in the boardroom and how that filters down needs to kind of probably be over-indexed and really like thought through.
Yeah.
I think where it really breaks, and I'm probably seeing that quite a lot at the moment. Obviously, I'm trying not to bring AI up too early because obviously,
please do.
I mean, I walk into meetings and people are like, "Well, it only took you 10 minutes before you brought it up," type thing. So obviously, I appreciate it's a very prevalent topic, isn't it?
It
but
is
one that everybody's maybe getting a little bit sick of, fed up of. But obviously, it's just kind of gaining momentum, and the capability that exists out there is just from December to where we are today, it's just changed really significantly, hasn't it? But boardroom conversations that then don't kind of translate down into the organisation in a healthy way, I think that's where things can really, really break. Obviously, a lot of boardrooms are making big decisions, thinking about how they drive strategy, and I do think what's really magnified at the moment is this ambiguous landscape. And then kind of the strategies that people are trying to figure out. You know, people are trying to figure out how we navigate this ambiguous situation. So just coming back to kind of that culture, you know, leaders leading by example, thinking about really great communication, all of those things that I think drive one, good culture, but also get your people following you. I think where it really breaks is when people forget that you can talk about something in a boardroom and then they don't really think about how do we translate that down into the organisation. Which again helps manage change and harness and manage the ambiguity ultimately.
I was going to say as well, I think the context of this can be dependent sometimes on the organisational type and size. So I've come from working with some of the biggest IT firms in the world to now working, well, for a multitude, but smaller organisations. And what attracted me to the smaller organisations was if you see something, you can change it. You're empowered to change it. You have a voice at that table. You're accountable. Whereas on the vast, the likes of IBM and some of the big kind of consulting organisations, to some extent that strategy and culture is defined from the top. And you're, however senior you may be, you're still a cog in that wheel. And your ability to kind of pivot and make change is a bit more of a challenge. So I think this organisational size makes a big impact on change.
Really interesting trend to uncover, because your responses, I wonder whether it's got to do with your background in businesses, because Chloe and Ella, you're kind of verging on, culture is basically leadership behavior. It starts with leadership behavior essentially, and then it's ingrained and fed into the lower levels, and then it grows naturally. For you, Matt, you've mentioned it's how people respond to certain things. So I think from your perspective of coming from a smaller organization, you're thinking about it from an influential people point of view, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so this is interesting because so many definitions of culture are different. The way that I would define culture, and this is what I'm trying to get out of you guys, is how would you actually define it? The way that I would define culture is when someone is implementing the 15th change of the month, they're tired, naturally there will be mixed messages, no matter how well we are at communication or how great we cascade that information down. There's going to be some level of a disconnect at some point. We almost have to plan for it. There's a lot of pressure. They're under the spotlight. They have to deliver, and they have to make trade-offs between quality and speed constantly. They have to make those difficult trade-offs between growth and integration and consolidation and stabilization and risk control and all of the things that come with that. How are they behaving when no one's looking? How are they behaving when they're really tired and really under pressure? That to me is culture, because that response, but it kind of combines what you both have, the three of you have uncovered, which is leadership behavior and the way that people respond to change. Naturally, how people are going to respond to change has a lot to do with what's been translated bottom down, so top down. So how would you, if you were to put a definition on it, if I were to force you to put a definition on culture in a world of perpetual change, and you were to redefine it almost in order for it to have a place and thrive in a world of perpetual change, how would you define it?
I'd use the word accountability somewhere in there.
Okay.
I think that's very important. I think when we look at the culture of the organisation I'm at today, we need and want people to be accountable.
Yes.
We need people to turn up. We need people to flag when they think something's not going the right way. We need someone to own client relationships.
Yes.
We need someone to act with urgency.
Yeah.
And for me, that's all about accountability.
Yeah.
And how do you build accountability is the $1,000,000 question, I would probably argue, because if everyone was accountable for their actions and did a good job, we'd have the unicorn company everyone wants. So to me, how I succinctly define it, I'll probably struggle with, but accountability is a really key part of it for me.
Okay. And would you intertwine accountability? What would you link it to if you're trying to build a resilient culture with resilient people that can constantly thrive through that perpetual ambiguity?
You used a really great word in one of your previous responses, empowerment. I think a culture of empowerment is a really fantastic one, with the right guardrails, with the right kind of expectations set, which maybe leads into that kind of accountability piece. If you can kind of set out the framework for what good looks like, it's then how do you empower people? I don't know. Sorry,
I
didn't
think that's great. No, I need you to jump in. So thank you.
It's impossible, I think, to dictate down to the nth degree like how you would want somebody to go about their job.
Yeah.
I think the culture sets the expectations for how you want to do it. You know, you want them to go out there and be the best representation of your business, achieving the outcomes that you want them to do, that you need them to do for the sake of your company's reputation, for the relationships that they have with others, for the relationship they have with their clients.
Yeah.
And that there's a consistent impression that someone gets from someone that works with your company. And it builds that reliability. So I think in terms of how companies set that structure, I think that there's an element in there around the expectations. I think we talked about the business size. Accenture's enormous, but clearly one of the expectations that is set really from day one is a culture of continuous change forever. You know, it's a hot topic now, but for us, I mean, I've been there a decade, and it's always been around continuous change, continuous reinvention. And so that is part of our culture. You know, it's easier to lean into these things when it's expected of you. Now there are other things within the culture of my smaller department that we've also been able to set, and we can be more specific around that. But I think, again, it's whether it's at the highest level or within your small team, it's the expectations around how everybody should be showing up each day.
Yeah, I really like expectations. And, you know, within our organisation, but I think more specifically with, I guess, the division and the unit that I'm looking after, I do have a set of expectations. They're not prescriptive, kind of black and white KPIs per se. They're a set of expectations that I feel drive the right behaviours within the division. We do have organisational ones of a similar kind of tone, but they are quite specific to my kind of group of people, I guess. And I really love having the expectations almost to create the guardrails.
Yeah.
And then I really try and drive like a culture of empowerment. And I do kind of use the language, like, you know, obviously to have that autonomy, you need to kind of manage up, and you need to really own that management up piece. You know, it's that kind of thing in life. Nothing comes for free. If you want the autonomy, you've got to manage up. You've got to keep me informed.
Yeah.
I'm not going to come and ask you those questions.
Yeah.
You come to me and you kind of keep me informed. So I really try and empower people in that way.
That's a really, really important point that isn't discussed enough, in my opinion, managing up. We talk a lot about, I remember you mentioning this about 7 years ago, and it changed my career. So thank you for that. When we are talking about managing up, what exactly do we mean, Chloe? And what sort of behaviours do you think drive successful managing up?
So you definitely don't get there on day one.
Yeah.
For somebody new who comes into the organisation, it takes time to kind of refine, I guess, the interaction that you would expect. But I think that's okay. And I think that's part of kind of the process of almost aligning people to your culture and the expectation. So for me, I'm quite simplistic. You know, we do go through that process with anybody new who joins the organisation in terms of how we refine that communication. What does good look like? You know, typically you might start with too much, then you might flip to too little, and then you kind of shake out in the happy medium. I do think as, you know, time goes by, you have to kind of sometimes go back in and refine that again. But, you know, honestly, the way I describe it is if I'm having to come and ask you questions, if I'm kind of having to come into your, almost like your little bubble to dig for information, we probably need to recalibrate. And I never approach that in a, you know, I'm mad kind of way, because that's not a great way to manage, is it? I don't really even like the word manage. It's more lead. But anyway, I think it's just it's a refinement piece. It's like learning to understand that individual, learning how they communicate. I think also you can understand quite a lot about how people respond to feedback. And then I think adjusting how you evolve somebody or build somebody up, you might change that depending on the personality and the character that you have there. So I guess what I'm saying is I think it takes quite a bit of shaping to get to a point where you get the level of managing up that you want and you expect from your people. But I think it's once you've got that in place, it drives really great culture. And I think it genuinely does make people feel empowered and give them the autonomy that I think drives successful organizations.
One of the themes that I heard from your answers, all of you, around culture were how much culture is about how people go about things. Like if you just distill it down, all three of you gave an answer, which was it's about how people are doing things, not why, not what, but it's the how. What do you look for when it comes to hiring? Obviously, you can train and help build up and evolve your people, but what are the key skills you're looking for when you know that you're hiring into a role or a company that is going to be changing?
When I interview people at the moment, I'm interviewing people that know far more about their area of expertise than I do. I'm generally speaking to people that are very, very technical. So I can't talk to them about that. But what I can talk to them about is their interests. Why are they interested in working with us? What is their passion about it? And I'm trying to understand, going back to the culture, do I think they're a good fit? Do I think that individual is someone that's going to show up, who's going to challenge the status quo, who's going to come with ideas? Or is it someone that's going to just do the bare minimum, get paid and go home that day? So we interview a little bit arguably upside down. So often the interview would start with myself, one of my colleagues, and then it'll go down to that relevant line manager that can talk about the technical competency that individual has. And then if there's a tick in all boxes, then we proceed with that. That's worked really well. There's a couple of exceptions, I'm sure everyone has, but generally speaking, that works well. And it also means that when that individual joins a company, they know immediately that they can speak to me or whoever it might be. And there's no wall, there's no hierarchy, there's none of that nonsense. It's all about we're all the same team here. We're all striving to over the same outcome.
That's a really interesting answer. Do you guys have similar approaches?
Assuming that you've got the right sort of technical knowledge or the right subject matter, for me, again, regardless of the type of role, it would be curiosity. and an interest in learning. And this is at all levels of an organisation. I think if you're coming in and you're in the early years of your career, then it's essential to be curious about why things are happening and learn about them, because that's how you grow. But I think also at the senior level, just that interest in learning, and more often it's around, what's new, what's emerging, but also what is making my team tick? Like what are the things that are really keeping my client colleagues up at night, and a genuine interest and curiosity in learning more about that. Because for me, that's where I see the greatest of success, is where you have a team of people that are interested in listening, and only afterwards you apply your extreme expertise in whatever subject. But actually it's having an understanding of, okay, how can you bring that expertise in the right way, how can you make it as relevant as possible. So I think if you've got a team of smart people that don't listen and are not interested in learning anything new, then the success will be short-lived. But you're limitless if you've got the people with those skills and they can take that forward.
I think just building on both your points, obviously you've both referenced there's like a baseline level of competency and skill that we're all hiring for. I hire really great energy. I really look for that in the interview, and that's kind of what I'm the measure I'm taking first of all. How do I feel engaging with this individual? Do I leave this room highly energized, ready to go, or just I kind of sit there and go, oh, gosh, you just don't want to be here, do you? Why am I wasting my time, kind of thing? So for me, energy is an absolute priority, kind of building on what the other two have said. And I'm also, in our line of work, I'm a massive believer in kind of gut instinct, So sometimes there are scenarios where the process or the black and white isn't the right way to go. And one of my team will be in a room full of very senior people, probably more senior than them, but I need their gut instinct to kick in to say, well, actually, no, our process that we're following here isn't right.
Yes.
We need to do something different. I need to go find a way for us to go kind of above and beyond. So I love energy, and I do also like to say that I hire good guts, which sounds a bit odd, but it's all comes back to gut instinct. And I think some people feel really uncomfortable engaging with gut instinct in the moment. They feel quite hamstrung by process and, industry or whatever it might be. But again, I think coming back to that kind of culture of empowerment, kind of gut instinct, I think is something that I really try and harness in my team and in my people.
I'm really on that point on energy, in understanding what it is that I guess that you're looking for or looking to feel. I think I have worked across a lot of like multidisciplinary teams over the years, and they've been strong because there are different people in there, and some of the people, with the greatest respect, I probably wouldn't have said in an interview would bring great energy in terms of how I would assume it's going to be. But they absolutely have their place in our teams. So are there different types of energy that you look to feel?
Well, again, I think the team that I look after is a client-facing team. So we're a client partnerships team. So we're responsible for, I guess, in many respects, making sure that our client partnerships are happy, healthy, and thriving. And I do think that is a role where you do need great energy. You need to be personable. You need to be able to build relationships. We have, a huge volume of technical and engineering capability that is, there's many people who sit in that cohort of people who are technically very capable, but also massively introverted and are not the people who come onto a call and bring the energy. But again, I think in the remit that, I'm looking after, that's why it's so important that my kind of group of people, I guess, in the organisation do have the energy, perhaps in some places to compensate for where it maybe isn't necessarily coming through from the engineering.
Be the translator, the interpreter to bridge between them.
So absolutely, like energy, there's a time and a place for certain types of energy. I think with what I do and the area I'm looking after, I just place a high value on great energy.
And I think this could come back to the people side, because I've been on interviews with some of my colleagues, and I come off the interview saying that individual's not right, and my colleague who is far more technically equipped, like, what do you mean? They are the best people I've ever interviewed. So having the right people in the right room
Correct.
to kind of read the situation, I think is key to it as well.
Absolutely. I would totally agree. There's a reason I don't do the technical hiring at Godel.
So I want to throw in a curveball. You've all talked about quite heavily about people behavior, human behavior, leadership behavior. And that was a really interesting question about hiring, because it's not just hiring in itself, it's what actually an organization is made up of in its people. In the next 5 years or so, given how fast things are moving, given how vast change is month to month.
Should we just talk about the next 6 months?
Yes,
If we're
that's a
talking
really
about
good idea.
5 years is
Over
a very
the
long
next
horizon.
That's a really good point. Let's talk about the next 6 months. Over
Rest
the
of
next
this year.
6 months and to 12 months. Let's be really short-termist, long-termist, 12 months. Do we think that expertise is going to have a place in interviews, in developing people, and when I talk about expertise, I'm talking about domain knowledge, technical expertise that have been built up over time? Because if we think about how we've developed people in the past, we've developed them in a way that stack your skills up, keep stacking them, add some EQ in there at some point, and then some human soft skills, we call them. They're hard skills because they're far harder than the technical skills that we talk about. And then you'll get to a leadership position and then keep growing, and that's your career. So there's a lot of people in the market and in enterprise organizations, or even small SMEs that have been put together, that have been asked to operate in a specific lane for 20, 25 years. And now that market and that operating model is completely changing and reimagining itself. We've got leaner structures. People are, enterprise organizations now having to compete with startups for the first time in history. So what do we think the development of people is going to look like when we are looking at certain attributes that we want or certain skills that we want in people in order for them to continuously thrive with the business?
I think for me it comes down, I don't think there's a lot of change from kind of what I look for today, is people's attributes. So having the right attitude when it comes to something, and you can learn a skill, right? But to your point, Lee, I think having people that have got the right attitude are inquisitive, and I don't think that's going to change. If we look at the likes of AI and the introduction of AI, which no doubt we'll come on to, you can have the best AI tools, but if you don't have someone that's inquisitive and has a human nature to sanity check it, to review it, to use it when it's applicable, and has that mindset, then I think that the use of AI as an example is quite short-lived, because you've got to use it in the appropriate sense, and that still requires people to have that mindset to review those things in that context, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely a set of uniquely human skills which I think will, kind of bubble up to the forefront of kind of what we all continue to look for in our hires. But I just think they're becoming even more important. I think AI is fantastic. I think, I don't think it's going to come in and, solve everything for us. I think it's going to really enhance our capability as humans. And I think if you understand how to use it, and to kind of have it augment a lot of what you're doing, I think it kind of really changes our output, how we can work, where we spend our time. I think it's a really interesting shift. I think people who are, not necessarily thinking about that and not kind of cognizant of that change, that's probably where you start to go, maybe you're probably not the right person for the organization. But absolutely people who kind of bring all of the, to your point, the curiosity, they're inquisitive, they want to learn. I think there's absolutely a place for those kind of people as industry evolves and as AI evolves and things like that. But it's definitely, we still need humans. We still need humans in the loop. We play a really important role in the changing landscape. And I think 5 years from now, not to kind of go back to the 5 years, but I think humans will very much still be around. I think the workplace will look very different. And that's, I think, the change that we're experiencing right now is the kind of the reimagining of the workplace, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
In my world of manufacturing, we will always need, in absence of full-scale physical automation, which is another can of worms that we can leave sealed, we will always need an operator to be able to run their line and an engineer to be able to fix their line. You need your industrial engineer to be able to sort of understand where the opportunities lie in your sites. I will always need my developer to be able to develop the products and the business teams to know where the opportunities are. But there's definitely a convergence of those roles. I think the days of your manufacturing, your IT or digital teams and sort of business functions comfortably operating in silos and hardly ever talking are over. That it's unrealistic to think that there's going to be any move back to that, and it's going to be increasingly again these mixed teams to get to outcomes that any business needs. And so I think that there's likely to be a stretch in expectations or a change in expectations around people's roles. Like I expect, a shift lead in a factory to have some more understanding of the digital technologies that are coming through so that he can translate from his world to their world to get to the better outcome. I expect my development teams to have a better understanding of the processes and the headaches that a factory team have to go through on a day-to-day basis so they can make their products better. So I think the people that will really thrive and accelerate in their careers are the ones that can do their job exceptionally well, but can understand that other perspective and translate it into something that's going to give a better outcome.
Do you think that we're going to get into a state, though, where it's technology first? So we are using this technology, we're using this AI tooling, or it might be, and we're going to hire people that are going to have to adapt to that and adopt it, as opposed to we're going to bring people in that can then make those choices, can then define it. We're doing some work at the moment with an organisation, and they've got quite an ageing workforce, and we're trying to introduce technology to them to bring improvements to allow them to be kind of leading in 5 years' time. The resistance to that is phenomenal. It's not something we were expecting, and it's something we're really struggling with now. So I think we need to look at the 5 years of technology and the 5 years of the people that are needed to embrace that to make sure they're at the forefront. And I think those two things really sit hand in hand.
For me, with an aging workforce or a non-digital savvy workforce, one of the biggest challenges is how can you harness that innate knowledge that they have? How can you harness everything that they've learned over the years in a way that translates into any of these future tools coming through, so that a graduate that you hire can step in on day one and stand half a chance of getting up to speed and performing the same as they would. So in that respect, perhaps there is an element of technology first, but with the people. One of my biggest bugbears, though, is technology first when you put a solution or a choice of technology before having a clearly defined problem or target state. I see it happen so often that someone will have been to a conference or a show and seen something, and the sales director's done a fantastic job of selling their product and it sounds wonderful. That's what we're going to use. But actually we haven't looked at our own processes or even really got some clarity around the problem that we're trying to solve here and how we want to go about it for our organisation. I think there is a risk if we go technology first from a implementation standpoint that you will have a collection of theoretically good technologies that actually are not serving your business.
I'd agree,
Yeah, you can't layer, well, in today's world, you can't necessarily layer technology on top of kind of the processes and practices that have been built today. So I think if we think about some of our clients, a lot of them are kind of looking at their engineering capability and they're talking about how do we get more productive, how do we do more with what we've got. And the organizations get to a point and then they can't extract anything more. And it's because they haven't actually thought about the organizational change that needs to be reimagined to really extract the benefit from the technology. So I think you do sort of need to organize around technology, but you absolutely have to also think about the broader organizational change that's needed to kind of really harness the power and I guess the benefit of some of the technology that exists today, and how you can build a fundamentally very different way to what we've done historically.
I think there'll be boardrooms all around the world that have been excited by AI and the potential of this, and exciting to be able to say that you've got, your first in-house chatbot for something or another, and get excited about that. But I think the realities day to day is that, in my opinion, technology is almost never going to be your silver bullet, and it can't fix a flawed process. But so often it's seen as an easy fix. It's easy to sign a contract to bring in a particular piece of technology, and that's going to fix things, without taking the responsibility to understand actually what hasn't been working in the first place, and either doing that up front or in parallel with this technology that you're bringing in, be clear on what needs to change and then doing it well. I think going back to your question at the very beginning, Lily, of what causes things to fail, I think that change and managing change in organisational setting, particularly in sort of the software engineering world, can sometimes seem like it's a training. You're giving a site or a team a one-time training and a handover. That's your change management, and that's it. That's just the bare minimum so that they can, on day one, use something. The actual hard part of managing that change so that it's successful is what comes afterwards, and making sure that it's adopted and that you continue to improve on the processes with whatever new capabilities you've been given.
We had another guest on the podcast that we did a couple of weeks ago, David Fern from NTT Data. He's the VP of AI, close network of yours.
He is a good friend.
Yes, indeed. And he put this he gave a very interesting angle on how he's trying to advise organizations to adopt AI. And the way that he's trying to do it is so that they look at AI as a way to grow, scale, and repeat ways of working. To your point, you can't fix a flawed process or ways of working with AI by just automating it, and you can't just plug it in and go, tick box, we've got AI, we're automated, we're with the market. You're using it in order to replicate, in order to be able to move faster, what do we think of that angle? How do we foresee that happening or developing over the next, I'm going to say 6 months, because...
Well, I think organisations last year probably could get away with having a bit of an AI narrative, and we've adopted a little bit over here. We've kind of plugged a bit in here. I think it's changed. I think the stakes have been kind of upped, and I think expectations have increased. So I think, maybe you can talk to this a little bit more, but the organisations that we work with that have PE backing, in particular, that's kind of that intensity in terms of the expectation and in terms of what the PE firm wants to see in terms of measurable impact has changed, particularly in the last, I would say, 4 to 6 months. Everybody's kind of got their head around probably what is really achievable, not just kind of what finger in the air 10x times faster, but actually kind of what is measurable impact, what can we see. So I think that is, just to go back, I think people could get away with a slightly different narrative kind of in a leadership capacity last year. I think this year, I think it is really important that organisations do understand how you adopt and drive that change effectively. So yeah, I think it's got more important to be able to have that kind of understanding of how you really do adopt that into your organisation, and it's not as simple as a silver bullet. I've given everybody some Claude licenses. Good luck. Make it happen. You actually really have to, drive that adoption and
be intentional.
Be really intentional about it and train and support. And we do quite a lot of work at looking at the kind of the environmental factors that help or hinder true adoption. So, that's looking at how product are feeding the engineering team, which obviously then stems up to how the organisation feeding product. And I think this is where, what we will see a lot in the next couple of years is like true organisational change and organising the workforce around kind of the new reimagined kind of processes. And to your point, I do think you have to understand the process and the workflow and what you're trying to achieve and obtain from the use of the technology. And that's really where I think organisations will get to a place where they can really harness kind of, I guess, the power. I'm using quite a few buzzwords of like AI first or AI native. But I do think there is a limitation in a lot of organisations today who are trying to get there because they haven't looked wider than their engineering capability. They haven't looked at the organisation and how they affect change there.
We were talking about this yesterday. We had a really interesting debate about it. How do you think that value creation in the workplace is going to change for people specifically? Because what I'm seeing a lot of enterprise organizations do is they're trying to almost re-establish the dynamic between them and their people. Not an us versus you sort of dynamic, how does leadership now operate with their teams? What dynamic is now there if AI is shifting the definition of value? And if I were to take my own sort of definition on how I see AI as a knowledgeable intern times infinity, right? Has incredible depth on information that you can get in an instant. However, it needs an incredible level of strategic direction. So what does that do to our people? If we are utilizing AI and we are utilizing it in the right way, and we understand what the problems are, and we're using it for scalability and for growth and for repeatability, what does that do to our people in terms of how they produce value in the workplace?
I think personally it allows them to be more, use their minds we hired them for. So we've had 2 use cases of AI, both for good and bad. So the bad scenario was a pitch deck that was needed to do for a client, and the individual that did it put it into AI, said, turn this pitch deck to me. As soon as we read it and we looked at it, we're like, what are you doing? This is not representative of us as a brand, as a company. This is not how the thought and attention we put into what we're doing. So veto it, park it.
Yes.
So in that scenario, the individual, I think, was trying to free up time, allowing them to do the more detailed project plans it may be, but the use cases wasn't right. The area where we've seen it work really well is when we're doing estimation of work.
Okay.
So often most companies will have this where ops think that something is going to take X amount of time, and delivery the salesperson wants it cheaper. So we find that effort gets reduced from quotes, and then you have issues down the line. So we've been using AI to review estimates of work and looking at it. So, well, the last 10 times you did a job like this, it took 50 days. Why all of a sudden do you think it's going to take 5 days or 10 days? So allowing AI to look and harness that historic data and then make challenging decisions allows people to spend more time on actually the client deck, the pitch, the important parts that require the requeue, not trawling through pages and pages of historic documents or timesheets, or whatever it may be. So I think automating that and allowing the individuals to do the EQ side of their job is the key part of it, in my view.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think when I build my proposals, Claude's very much sat open there, and I'm probably kind of engaging. I call her a her. I don't know if anybody has.
Claudette.
I love
Claudette,
that.
yeah.
Oh,
It's not what I call
lovely.
though. I haven't quite gone as far as Claudette, but I refer to her as a
she.
female.
Love it.
So she's open there, and I'm kind of working, and I will almost, question and engage and go, what do you think about this? Am I missing anything in this kind of like this narrative based on what you know about us and our organization and things like that? So I think it can really kind of augment, it certainly augments my kind of human capability and helps me, I think, drive better product and output. I think I was talking to a CTO, and he used the kind of the statement of we're in a world now where we can automate things that before were not economically possible. Like, it just didn't make sense to, because of the cost that's associated with it. So I think there's like real power in humans being able to unlock that additional automation or potential within their organizations, because now they can build those things that perhaps they couldn't afford to build before. So I think when you talk about how is a human bringing value to their organization, being able to identify those things that historically were not, you wouldn't automate them, you wouldn't even touch that process, you can now build those things very quickly, and it can be a real game changer to that organization. And it's not, yes, the AI is doing the building, but it's the human who's found that opportunity. And to your point, that's really key, right? Is there is so much power within AI and the tooling today. but it's absolutely got to be managed, and it's got to be pointed in the right direction, and it's got to be guided.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's where those kind of very uniquely human skills will really remain, and I think that's where actually humans can bring a lot of value. In I guess in partnership with the tooling that exists today.
I really liked your examples there of the sort of the good and the bad. I think we've all seen that in terms of the bad, especially.
Yeah, I think there was a particular enterprise organisation that was in the news recently about an interesting way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've all seen the examples of where it has or has not been so successful. I think that in an industrial setting, especially when they're not perhaps talking about an email or a presentation or something, but have this knowledge of the area that they're managing, and there might have been hypotheses over the years about things that work well or not, or to your earlier point around this knowledge that has been built up over decades of working in a particular area. The technologies that are available to us today have the potential to turn that innate knowledge into fact. We're able to start seeing the gut feel that they might have around how to fix something. We can start to find actually how that gut feel is represented in the data, because we've got unprecedented visibility to what's going on in our sites or our factories. And I think this is the really nice then relationship between AI and the technologies that we're using and the people element, because data will show you what's happened, but you need the people who know that area to know what to question or to find something interesting and probe into it further. It's not going to give you all of the answers. Okay, it might give you some insights or some suggestions, but really it's knowing which pieces of the puzzle to put together. The bit where I get really excited is where you're able to unlock the complexity that a human brain wouldn't be able to by itself. The amount of variability that you can look into when you're looking at building a particular product. Human brain, we might be able to look at 3, maybe 5 different things to see some patterns in there, but actually you can look at hundreds of variables. But you're dependent on that person to know exactly which of those variables, which of those insights that you start to see, the trends that you start to see appearing are interesting and worth exploring further. And then maybe turn it into something that is going to have that feedback loop, removing the human or distancing the human from it. But you're not going to get to that point unless you've had the human along the way to sort of build and have that relationship.
So touching on your point around puzzle pieces, really good point. What does that do naturally to the human that's having to probe and put the puzzle pieces together? Because I think it's from my point of view at least, what that does is it forces us to continuously think about the outcome that we're trying to achieve, which essentially is the value at the end of the day, right? It's KPIs and targets will naturally shift and change massively based on where the market is going and how organizations are now going to perform in the new world. So when we are constantly having to think about the outcome and ensure that we are critiquing the AI against that outcome, and we're basically scoring its work against the value that we're trying to produce, at any layer, you're naturally building your teams up to think strategically about ROI and outcomes and what good looks like and what success is in a business. How does that then translate into how people can position themselves from a careers perspective in an organization so that they can continuously, I like the word durability, right? So they can build that level of durability because AI is going to change, skills are going to change. What's definitely not going to change, to your point earlier, and that's the need for, we're calling them human skills at the moment, but I like to call them durable skills, which is that constant want to play around with value and outcome and what that essentially means, and pushing up against walls that have previously existed before that may not now work. How do people position themselves in the business?
A couple of things here, and one of them is from an organizational perspective, being clear on sort of your pyramid of the pinnacle is your corporate strategy. What is it that you fundamentally as a business need to do in terms of cost savings, growth? And at the very bottom is the people that are actually doing their tasks in the day-to-day
Yes.
and how they're measured on success.
Yes.
And whether directly or through several layers, these things need to marry up.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the career progression, I think you touched on it well earlier, of the managing upwards. I think that one way to have personal success is understanding how what you're doing day to day is contributing to that bigger picture. And actually understanding the context means that you can do your job better, because you'll make certain decisions if you know more about what that end goal is. Now, you don't necessarily have to figure out your link up to the very top of that pyramid, but I'd say thinking a level or two above, like, what is it that that my line manager needs, or that my practice lead needs, or my site director needs, or the regional manager needs? What is it that they're determining as success? What is it that they're needing to prove? And what's my role within that?
Yes.
Because if you're clear on what that trajectory looks like, and you can show how you're contributing to that, it just has that, it shows that you have that awareness, that thought process of how your business works. I think that any manager worth their salt would realise that you need to harness people like that and really encourage them to build on that. Because if they have that awareness of the foresight to anticipate what's coming through, and as a manager you'll find it easier as well to have those people in your team that can anticipate. I think that those are some of the things of, like, having that clarity of linking success and what it means at different levels, and then being able to show your role within that.
Yeah, when I was researching and kind of doing some prep for this podcast, did you two do prep? Just
No.
Top
zero.
No,
I was reading, and I read something which was, actually the introduction of AI has almost kind of like magnified where there are gaps in kind of organizations. And I think what you're talking about there is kind of what's the goal, what's the ambition, what's the strategy, and it's making it harder to kind of hide from those gaps and that lack of clarity that can exist in an organization. So I do think, if I think about it from an engineering context, we're starting to see methodology and how people are kind of operating within those teams change. So things like BMAD, spec-driven development, that's kind of all coming in to play, and that's ultimately providing greater clarity to an engineering team so that they can drive the output and the product that they're being tasked with building. And I wonder if that just kind of really filters up to how, as leaders, we need to be driving that clarity in our expectation to allow people to really understand how they operate and keep people on the straight and narrow, right? Because we talk about work slot, we talk about kind of people going a bit rogue, but absolutely, if there's that clarity in those guardrails and that clear expectation, I think people can really perform.
I think it can definitely provoke some potentially uncomfortable reflections or discussions in the leadership meetings.
Yeah.
If the lack of understanding or any of the tensions around managing change or expectations amongst your teams are as a result of perhaps things aren't as clear from the leadership strategy as possible. And I think that there's a certain amount of reflection that is often needed of are we clear enough ourselves? Like, are we consistent in how we're communicating this?
Even though earlier
are we
were
all
talking
aligned?
about ambiguity, and this
exactly
the vast amount of ambiguity that exists. But
are we actually agreed, or do we just say that we're agreed, and then when we leave the room we're talking about it in a different way, and therefore our teams are confused?
That's really interesting, isn't it? So there's quite a lot out there at the moment around how leaders are having to make decisions and get comfortable with making decisions in ambiguity. I think what then filters down and is really important is taking into consideration all of that ambiguity and that changing landscape is then, how are you, what's kind of that culture that you're creating, and what are the, how are you rewarding certain behaviors, even though those behaviors today might be right, but in 2 months' time they might be, you might need them to have evolved. And I think that's probably one of the most challenging aspects of leadership at the moment is, how are we kind of evolving with the change, and then how are we evolving our strategy or our direction, our communication.
Yes.
My team, for example, at the moment, we've gone through quite a lot of change as an organisation. naturally as a byproduct of everything that's happening in our industry, and really kind of having to take our clients on that journey as well and helping them manage change. But yeah, we're facing into conversations that we definitely weren't facing into, 3 months ago. But again, I think what I come back to is my team really kind of buy into our culture and our mission and what we're trying to do. And I think it's how do we kind of continue to reinforce that?
Especially when the definition of organizational resilience and team resilience is constantly shifting. Because we're talking about the ground to constantly be shifting when it comes to like skill set or what people are required to do or value creation is. But what do you do when the very definition of resilience and what resilience means from a people and organizational perspective is constantly shifting? Because right now it means adapting to change. Who knows what it's going to mean in 6 months or 12 months, because our understanding of change at the moment is very primitive in itself. And that's not just AI, right? That's just how the market is absorbing the change, and therefore we have to respond to it.
Is it change or is it chaos?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question.
I say it in jest, but sometimes it does feel like chaos, doesn't
Well, that's
it,
why I
at
call
times?
it rolling turbulence, because I think if you, I really like what you said earlier, and Matt, and I'm going to take this away for my own sort of leadership conversations moving forward. It's how do you focus on what's not going to change in a world of things that are constantly changing? And if you focus on what isn't going to change, then I imagine you can build yourself a level of foundation that can, or durability in your people that can become the center of how you evolve. But we have some fire questions.
We have some quick fire questions to end the episode. The first one is, for anyone that does feel like they're in a state of chaos at the moment, somebody in a senior leadership position, what would you advise them to do as of tomorrow morning, walking straight back into work, to regain some level of control?
Vocalize it. Vocalize it with peers, discuss with peers, you know what, how do you feel about this? What's going on? What's on your mind? And equally, don't turn up to your team pretending you know all the answers. If there's stuff that's unheard of, it's you're right, we have to deal with this together. This, I don't know the answer, don't look at me for this, but together we have to deal with this. I've been part of quite a few integrations, and the way it goes well with an integration is when everyone has a voice at the table. Where it's not gone so well, as a mandate, this is how we're doing it, and this is, you have to take it or leave it.
Absolutely. I would say that vulnerability is really key. And again, I think that's how you build trust in people, and you can take them on that journey with you as well. So yeah, I agree with kind of your points there. And it's not about then creating a really big elaborate strategy. It's just kind of about putting some initial points down on paper, some kind of guiding pillars, and starting to really operate within, I guess, that light framework, and developing and building it with the right people around you to help you calm the chaos.
Such the tough end of the table here. Matt's got a couple of great ones there that I would have gone to, but I think if there's something that you're unclear on, or that you think, why am I not getting this? It's almost guaranteed that you're not the only person in the room that has that uncertainty. So ask the question, provoke your colleagues. What is their understanding of it? And it might be clear that in the room full of people that think that they've understood this, they've all got completely different understandings. And that in itself is a problem.
Yes.
But at least it's not one that is now surfaced. And you can work to a point of clarity together. Equally, you might have colleagues that are in the same boat as you and have just thought that it's not them getting it. So at least it's now on the surface. You can do something about that.
It's almost, just to add on to that, it's almost like we're telling leaders to get really comfortable with saying, I don't know, but we'll figure it out. Because almost, if we think about it, if we're really honest, saying I don't know 5 years ago in a boardroom was considered suicide, career suicide, because you have to have all the answers when you're at the top. But nowadays, it's almost an advantage to go into things by saying, I don't know, we're going to have to experiment. Let's treat everything as an experimentation and figure out the solution.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I love the saying, fail fast.
Yes.
Let's not have umpteen calls on something. Let's make a decision.
Yeah.
Let's make some kind of we've applied some common sense as why we think it's the outcome,
Yeah.
and let's try it. And if it fails within the parameters we put in, fine, we'll move and try something else.
Yeah.
But one of my bugbears is the amount of calls you, at the end of the day, you look back on, it's like, what have we actually decided we're doing today?
Yeah.
So we've got a mantra now, is every single call you have an outcome and a way forward. And if you're not going to have that, you don't have a call.
And are you getting to a point where you're trying to move really fast in terms of timelines to an outcome?
Yeah, there's that. There's certainly, we want to be doing things quicker, as all
Yeah.
organisations do, but it's also, I think, the frustrations as well of joining. As I say, you look back on the day, like, we've just spoken for 8 hours and nothing's been achieved.
Yeah.
I think everyone, with the move of people being more home-based than kind of we have been in 10 years ago, that's a real risk, I think, of people is joining calls. I'm going to look like I've got an input on this. I look like I've got a view. Then I move on to my next one. So accountability is right at the beginning is really key for me.
I think I've seen organisations lean into the fail fast perspective, and it's boring, but actually having a plan, the structure to support that is really important.
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes the fail fast can be interpreted as a free for all. We're going to try everything all at once and see what sticks. We're going to throw all at the wall.
Yeah.
Whereas actually it's, I don't know the answer now, but here's how we're going to figure it out. And actually within that process of figuring it out, which is structured, we're okay with some of the things not being the right answer, but that is going to be in a managed, consistent way.
Yeah.
It's not everybody running off and doing things by themselves and then coming back and we found that we've actually created 10 more problems for ourselves.
Yeah.
I think it's balancing sort of the speed and actually the willingness to learn and a course correct, but having that structure and like knowing how we're going to get to the point of an answer is also really important to sustain that flexibility and sort of the freedom in thinking and how you approach things.
That's a really beautiful answer to a question which I wanted to ask all of you just to wrap up. And that is, if you know that you're about to roll out quite a significant change, what's the best way to get everybody involved and feeling like it's the right thing to do?
Communicate where you can.
Yeah, I'd say a level of transparency where it's appropriate is really important. There's nothing worse than people feel like there's like a lot happening behind closed doors and they're not kind of privy to that. So I think you need to manage that as part of the communication as well.
Identify who are going to be your advocates. Involve the people that are likely to be on the receiving end of this and get some of their perspectives, because you'll probably learn something. And change in an organisation works better when people feel like they're part of it rather than it just being done to them.
One final one, because we've talked about human behaviours and people. I kind of want to close it off with the organisational side of things. How work is incentivised is a massive topic. We won't go into it today. Maybe a second podcast episode is required for it. But that is dramatically going to change. And naturally, it has to change if our expectations of how people produce value and how they perform in their role is going to change. If we were to be advising leaders who are listening right now, what's the quickest win they can make and implement tomorrow in order to incentivize work in a way that absorbs perpetual change in a positive and healthy manner?
Focus, I think, for me on incentivizing impact and outcomes. Don't create a scenario in which people are rewarded for looking busy or being able to have a measurement of being busy. It needs to be tied to something worthwhile. Now, at a senior level in organizations, people are used to being judged on their impact. You know, you're managing a P&L, or you are responsible for the rollout of a program and you have go lives or products, something
ROI.
more tangible, and you're very used to living in that space where your success is measured on an outcome. That's not always the same across other levels of organizations. So make sure that people are clear on the outcomes that are expected of them and that they are incentivized towards those, because change comes through all the time and at increasing pace. And so people need to have that sort of consistency of what they still need to achieve despite everything that might be going on.
So are we saying not to incentivize them on getting tasks done or the completion of tasks, but incentivizing them on the outcome of work? When we talk about impact and outcome, what do we mean essentially?
From my perspective, at least, I think that would be often a step in the right direction.
Okay.
So I've seen other examples of success metrics when people have looked at, the number of assets connected, the number of data points collected.
Yeah.
We're looking at success from, the largest numbers of those things that are possible. And that might not actually translate into any ROI for your business. I would rather see 2 assets connected and 5 data points that enable you to solve your biggest problem.
Mm-hmm.
That, for me, is more impactful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just being very clear on, are we encouraging the right behaviours?
Yeah.
Are we setting the right expectations to come full circle? And are we clear with people on actually what that looks like for us?
I think the question was, what can a leader do tomorrow, kind of walking in?
Mm-hmm.
And, I agree with kind of what you've said there. I think one of the most powerful things a leader can do is lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that really does incentivize
Mm-hmm.
the right behavior and good behavior and
Yeah.
the outcomes that you probably want within your organization without kind of taking it down to maybe a KPI level or an outcomes. I think just leading by example is probably one of the most important things that we can be doing today. And again, I say that because things are changing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So actually it can be quite hard to kind of, have things remain as they were yesterday. Tomorrow you might want a different set of outcomes with something that's shifted.
Yeah.
So I think certainly one of the things I think about every morning when I wake up and then kind of go to bed is, how have I led today? What examples have I set? If I'm asking that of my team, have I done that myself? If I'm encouraging the use of, I know I keep coming back to Claude, but if I'm saying we need to be using it, you should be using this is going to change. Am I doing it myself? And am I showing them what good looks like?
Mm-hmm.
So I think in a changing landscape where there's a lot of ambiguity, one of the things that can be a real constant that can incentivize the kind of the right behaviors that you want is leading by example and showing up for people.
I'd agree. And I think empowering people is a key part of that as well. If
Yeah.
you've got, especially in the world of AI, we've been speaking a little bit about, if you've got someone coming in doing the mundane tasks time and time and time again, not thinking for themselves,
Yeah.
you've got a use case for AI there.
Yeah.
If you need people to be empowered to have a credibility to go back to the end of their day before they go to bed thinking, I've actually made some change today, not just I've made this deck or I've done this spreadsheet, what it might be. It's I've made a change that's going to help the organisation. I think that empowering of people is a key part.
If I were to force you to describe in one word what leading by example means today and in the next 6 to 12 months, the future of work, the future of workplaces, the future of organisational performance, what word would you use?
Accountability.
Accountability. You've been very consistent
I
with
like
your
that word.
messaging.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great word. I do think, I know I've used the word energy and I get that can mean something different to everybody. But, honestly, sometimes I switch on my computer on a Monday morning and I have to have a word with myself. I'm being quite vulnerable there, probably shouldn't be too open about that.
We all do it.
But as a leader, there's some days where you've really got to bring the energy, right?
Yes.
So I think that's really important. If I was to say like one thing that I know I can probably consistently do for my team, is bring the energy. Bring the energy.
I like it.
So I think leading by example for me is really engaging with my team and listening to them so that I understand what they're needing.
You've got one word, Ella.
I used
Leading by
3.
example.
So
Okay,
so
you
for
can
me,
use
I'd have to
3.
go like
bring the energy.
leading by example for me then would be that listening.
Listening.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a great one.
That's great. That's great.
But I think that's so important in, when you think about the accountability, bringing the energy, and then listening.
Yeah.
It's quite nice.
I like it. Accountability,
Combination, isn't it?
accountability,
Go well together.
energy, listening.
Sorted.
Sorted. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our amazing guests from today. I really enjoyed this episode and hope you did too. We will make sure that everything we spoke about is linked in the show notes, including everybody's LinkedIn profiles, so you can stay up to date with their work. If you'd like to share this episode with a friend, we would be so grateful if you did so.
And if you'd like to know more about how Rezilien is redefining change in complex organisations, then a link will be included in the show notes.
Thank you so much and stay tuned for the next one.
Thank you.